Welcome to Beat Around the Barn, where in this episode, we tackle the question, what is animal activism?
And I am especially excited for this episode, as you know, Anne.
Yeah.
Because this is how I started my journey into veganism, with direct activism. Of course, I went vegan for the animals at the age of 15 years old, and right away was really into the protests and leafleting and getting myself out there to educate and spread awareness. There were a lot of challenges that came along with that as well. So we're going to get into that throughout the episode. I won't get into that now.
Okay, great.
With some special guests.
We made this great connection with an organization called Animal Activism Mentorship. Their structure is that they have a mentor and a mentee, so anyone who wants to learn how to become an animal activist can come to their organization and have somebody who will mentor them. So we will have a mentor and a mentee join us today, where we can really unpack this and look at what is animal activism. So come have a listen. Great. Thank you so much for joining us, Julia and Fawn from Animal Activism Mentorship. We'd love for you to help our audience get to know you a bit. So maybe you could tell us a bit about your mission, why you got started, how you founded, as well as how many members you have.
Great, yes. So we got started because we were trying to imagine what a world would be like if every vegan was an animal rights activist and sort of brainstorming how we could make that possible. So our mission is to normalize animal rights activism and provide aspiring activists with community, education, and mentors to make that happen. Currently, we have 25 mentors and 40 mentees. However, over the past year since we got started, we've had hundreds of mentees, some of which who have even graduated to become mentors themselves and start on some really big projects. So
yeah. And how who founded it? Was it a team of you, friends, and it was just like a brainchild that kind of?
Yeah, it was a team of animal rights activists that were coming together and again just brainstorming like how can we get more. So it's said that there's about 1 to 2% of all vegans are animal rights activists, which is a very small percentage.
Right.
And we've seen what groups of animal rights activists can accomplish when they come together.
Yes.
And so, we thought we have such a large potential out there to do so much more if we can get more people on board. And a lot of times you'll find that they already want to get started and just don't know how. And they're scared and they just need a little bit of help, especially in rural areas, right? Where there's not a large city population, there's not an infrastructure of already established animal rights activists.
Yes.
But that doesn't mean that they can't do very big things. And so just helping to guide them, helping to show them where their potential lies, meeting them where they are at, and helping to, amplify that for them.
Yeah, so actually that's really great, right? Because you are a mentor, and are you also one of the founding members as well? Or did you go through the process and become a mentor?
So I've been an animal rights activist and a vegan for 15 years. I was not a part of starting it. I came on a couple months later.
Okay.
I hadn't heard that was happening yet, and so by expanding my vegan community, vegan animal rights activist community, I stumbled upon these, activists making these big strides and big advancements, and I said, hey, do you guys need help? And of course they were like, yeah.
Right, that's awesome. That's so good. So then, Fawn, how did you come about? First off, what was your call to it? Was it a calling? How did you say, okay, I think I want to learn more about it? Or did it happen that way? We'd love to hear your story.
Well, me and my family, we became vegan almost 3 years ago. We pretty much started off just eating a plant-based diet because me and my boyfriend were asthmatic. So we ended up watching What the Health, and we pretty much cut dairy out, and we cut out pretty much everything else. Like literally that night, we trashed everything in our house.
Yes.
And then a few months later was when I learned about actually being vegan as opposed to just eating a plant-based diet.
Yes.
I watched Earthlings, which it took me a while to finish it. And then Dominion. I kind of tried to watch them simultaneously, but it took me weeks or even like 2 months to even finish them.
Sure.
So after that, I pretty much just, I was already following, a bunch of activists online, like Joey Carbstrong and Earthling Ed and all of them. And just seeing the footage all the time just like broke my heart. And it's just like, I'm like, okay, well, I learned pretty much more about like supply and demand because my thing was, my brother actually, the first time I ever heard the word vegan was from my younger brother, but he wasn't vegan, but he was like, I'm going to do the Challenge 22. So I was just like, well, okay, whatever. But it was kind of like, well, I'm still going to eat meat. I literally, like, I can't believe I said this, but like, I was like, I'm still going to eat meat because they're going to kill the animals anyway. So if I'm not eating it, it's just they're dying for no reason. I didn't really understand the supply and demand aspect of it.
Got it. Yeah.
So after I learned about that, and I was seeing the stuff online all the time, I was like, I'm not doing enough. Like there's me not paying for these products to be produced is not doing enough. So I was actually on YouTube probably about like a month or so ago, and I came across I forget who I was watching, but I came across just a random video that popped up underneath, and it said something about like how to get active in your community, and I was like, I need this. So I clicked on it, and it was this guy, Sol Eubanks. He was talking about animal.
Yes, he's from Atlanta, right? The one in Atlanta?
So,
yeah.
And he was talking about the mentorship, and I was like, what is this? So like I started YouTubing that, I Googled it, I had like 10 tabs open, and I was like, I need to find out what this is. And I did the application that night, and then Trey, he reached out to me like that same night, and I was just like, I need to do this. And I was so excited. I was like, this is meant to be. This is what I need.
Yes.
And he set me up with Julia.
Oh, so nice.
And that was just how long ago?
Maybe like a month or so.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so lovely.
So what was your first interaction like together as mentor-mentee?
So our program does such a good job of pairing people up with mentees and mentors that are already somewhat like-minded, if possible, so we both have children who we're raising vegan, and we're around the same age group, and we're into kind of the same kind of activism, or what she was describing as she wants to get started in, is what I excel in. And so we hit it off the bat, and just, sending her different links and stuff where she's like, I've already watched this. And she's like so excited. She's so ahead of so ahead of the game. So it's mentees like her are like gold mines.
Yes.
You don't have to like, nudge. They're already running, and you're like, here, take this, take this. And it's like, so our right off the bat, it was just an amazing connection.
So what kind of activism do you like, Fawn, or are you called to, I guess I should say?
And that is another thing that was mentioned on the application. What kind of activism have you already done? And if you haven't, what kind of activism would you like to do?
Yes.
So me, like I was telling Julia when I met her, that I'm introverted. I don't like this kind of stuff. I don't like talking to people. But I'm like, I have to, and I'm like, I have to change my mindset, and I have to put myself out there to make a difference.
Beautiful.
I mean, when I first started eating plant-based, I went ahead, I made like a public Instagram where I was just posting like recipes and pictures of vegan food, because I'm like, well, this is gonna, make people change their mind. It looks good. They're gonna click on it and be like, oh, look at that burger. Oh, wait, it's plant. So, and then after I got more into, learning more about like the factory farming and the animals, I started posting stuff that had to do with like slaughter and stuff like that for awareness. So I was doing that pretty much since day one. I've taken like Post-its, write down random things, documentaries, stick them on, whatever. And then just educating anyone that, I came in contact with as much as I could, especially like, coworkers, hey, what is that? That looks good. Oh, it's plants. Nut. What? No. That looks weird.
Sure.
And I had a few people, coworkers that I've kind of converted into eating plant-based. They didn't necessarily become vegan per se with the whole lifestyle, but I'm like, it's less animals dying if you're eating plant-based, but that was pretty much the only things that I've really done.
Sure.
So, and I wanted to do more. Like I've been to the National Animal Rights March in DC, and that was awesome. And I wanted to be out there with signs. I didn't go out there with signs because I was like, I don't want everyone looking at me. But then I got there and I'm like, there's so many people doing this. Nobody's gonna pay attention. Nobody cares about me.
Right.
They're gonna read the signs. So I really wanted to change, how I am with people to be able to get the message out there as much as possible.
I know, Ella, you've done a lot more of the, say, direct activism. For me, I think I joined maybe like a GMO march one time, and I swear it was on Miami Beach, and it was like maybe 10 or 15 people, right? And here we are screaming, and people were like, what is a GMO? And it was just like I had felt awkward, and while I am actually an extrovert, I have this thing where I really want other people to feel comfortable. And so I had a noise in my head. Oh, if I'm screaming, am I making them uncomfortable, right? Was my whole noise in my head. And so for me, a form of activism, definitely starting a sanctuary. Obviously, I think that's like almost every vegan's dream, right? Is to start a sanctuary and be guardians to animals. Was to me like a quiet activism in a way, because if people really knew what money, cost, learning goes into animals, the saving, the transport, if you knew what goes into it, they'd be amazed. Like, you're doing all of that for 3 pigs? Yes, I am, because they matter. And, so that in itself was like, oh, actually, I am doing a little bit of activism, it was like hitting me in that way, And for me, personally, fits well. I happen to like that.
Sorry.
No, I just want to amplify off that because, so I want to go into a couple of different forms of activism.
Please.
Some of them were mentioned, and I just want people to understand like what we're talking about and those channels. So, outreach, one of the most used form of activism. We do it with our family, our friends, our coworkers, sometimes strangers, people we meet at the grocery store. So that is kind of just one of the most versatile forms of activism. You don't have to be boots in the streets, and you can be doing it all the time, anytime, anywhere.
Yes.
But then there's stickering, as Fawn was mentioning, or papering, where we don't actually suggest that you put it directly on the packages anymore, which that are kind of changed throughout when we figured out what works and what doesn't, because a lot of times they'll just throw those products out and then one will ever see them. And so putting them on the tags above where they're being sold, or sometimes if it's eggs, like inside the carton on the top, so when they get home they'll see them, they're like, oh, next scan for a code, and it sends them to Earthlings, or some non-conventional stickering, out and about in the neighborhood, stop signs, whatever. We're not maybe discouraging or
duly noted.
There's hanging banners. That's another form of outreach, which is like you don't have to be seen, but your message will be seen a lot. So you can be sort of more of a silent activist.
Got it.
And maybe not branch out of that comfort zone, but still making a huge impact. And then there's another form that is transporting animals. So there's a huge need for transporting animals and to and from sanctuaries to, that's I've done this so many times where it's like you don't need any credentials. You just need a driver's license and a vehicle, or you can even rent a vehicle or borrow one. I've borrowed them so many times. But this is such a huge form of activism, and here's why. Because these animals have their own stories, they have their own voices, they can be their own advocates, and you are helping to amplify their voices, their stories. You're helping them tell their own stories. They're very capable, and very able to speak for themselves if we give them that platform. Having a sanctuary, being that platform, being their advocate, being able to amplify their own voice, that is crucial because they are often silenced. They are often not given, not even able to see them, let alone hear them. But in sanctuaries, you are. And that is huge because I think it gives them, one, a face, a name. It shows their complex personalities. It shows that they are each individuals, that they are not a product. And so I think one of the best forms of activism is sanctuary work. And that's one of the first things that I personally encourage my mentees to do is find your local sanctuaries, get involved, be an advocate for these animals where you give them a space to amplify their own existing voices and telling their stories. So sanctuaries are amazing. And then I do just want to talk a little bit about boots in the streets activism because I think everyone, one, it's the most commonly known of. It's what we see the most when we think of animal rights activists. We're holding signs, we're shouting in a megaphone. And I think it's, there's a couple reasons that it's the most commonly seen. One, they work. Two, they get in mainstream media. And three, they're uncomfortable. So people love to talk about the uncomfortable things. But a couple of things I'd like to mention about that is that even though they can seem a little bit overwhelming, a little bit intimidating, you're not doing that much differently when you're there than when you're doing in your own outreach every day. You're just doing it louder. And the importance of this is that there's a norm society happening, and it involves animal exploitation and abuse. And when you are out there disrupting or holding a protest, you are disrupting that norm. You are taking it and you are halting it and you are breaking it open for everyone to see. And it's important because it shines a spotlight into these companies, into these industries, and those who support them. And so don't feel overwhelmed. Step out of the comfort zone a little bit. It's not as scary as it seems because usually there's a large group of people there and you don't have to be the one shouting in the megaphone. Start out small. Start out just holding the sign, being a body, because the more people that you have there, the louder you are heard, the bigger you are seen, the more widespread, everyone sharing it on their own social medias, it's going to go much further. And, again, you're already saying those things every day. You're just now, you're amplifying your voice and giving it a space to do it louder and projecting it specifically to those who are most, exploiting and abusing and profiting off these animal cruelty and injustice issues. So, those aren't the only forms, but I just want to highlight.
Definitely. Love that you explained all that. Yeah, that's really, really good. So then your organization, as you are explaining this to mentees like Fawn, right? How is it that you help channel their passions per se? Is it that you kind of just give them the buffet and then see what they choose, Or do you start to see something in them and then cultivate that? Or how does that work?
Yeah, and that's part of the application too that helps us begin to navigate where their skills may lie. Again, sometimes when you get into it, even if nothing was on paper, nothing that they've experienced or shown interest in, sometimes you'll find that once you show them a couple other avenues, then they find where they excel. Then they see things that they never even knew existed or that they were good at, that they were passionate about. So yes and no, but typically we start off by meeting them where they are at and helping them to take where they excel and just really amplify that. So, but also, again, I suggest, and every mentor is different. We allow, to be a mentee, you've qualified in your experience and your professionalism in speaking out for animals. And so we trust that everybody has their own way, and that's why we pair certain mentees with mentors. But, I personally love to challenge a little bit, and if you haven't tried these avenues, just try them once. Even if it just breaks you out of your comfort zone a little bit. One, it usually breaks that misconception or fear about them, and then you can get involved in the future or be like, I know what that's about. Like, I maybe next time I'll go and I'll do this, or that's not really for me. I felt really uncomfortable, and let's cross that off the list.
Sure.
And move on to the next thing. So that's kind of how I do it. But in animal activism mentorship, there's not like a clear-cut guideline on that. We are given our own ability to.
Yeah.
I love what you were talking about earlier about mindset. I'd love to hear, Julia, from you, what you found mindset-wise, the shifts that a lot of people have to make. Talking about fears. You were fearful of making other people uncomfortable. What are some of the common shifts that you help people make so that they can be more effective activists?
Sure. So I find that a lot of people struggle, mentees coming up, or really anyone in the animal rights world, especially once they've made that shift into veganism, their biggest struggle mindset-wise is how to channel anger. How to deal with people that completely shut you down or come at you and just nonstop, won't leave you alone, but or are constantly triggered. Especially friends and family, especially those closest to us.
Absolutely.
Right? Coworkers, but even strangers, or even at or the fear that this is going to happen at a protest or a vigil or different forms of outreach. So, I like to start off by reminding everyone that most of us were not born vegan. We came from where these people are at. Many of us forget about where we were before we went vegan and the kind of mindset that we had, right? So it almost, looking back, we're like, yeah, I just went vegan. But no, it was a slow drip over our entire lives. Every single influence, every single introduction to animals, every single, Bambi. Nemo, watching Nemo as a kid, every single experience led us up there. And our final experience before we became vegan was the one that was, the last domino that just tipped them all,
over.
right? But it wasn't the only one.
Sure.
So these people who are causing us discomfort, who are coming with anger, triggered, they are having an internal conflict that has nothing to do with us, but their whole world is rocked, and they are triggered because they are feeling guilt. Because if they accept what we are saying, if they accept what we are there about, then they have to admit that their entire lives leading up to this point was a lie, and they were responsible for being a part of this animal cruelty. And so to come with a understanding, to just, it's okay to step back. It's okay to just let them, you don't have to have the last word. You don't have to school them, giving them the information that they need, giving them with something to walk away with. It's not, doesn't mean that's the end of the game. That doesn't mean that they're never going to change or they're never going to get it. It just means, wow, you've made a difference, because only someone super triggered is showing that, wow, they're probably closer to someone who was like, I don't care. They're probably having this internal conflict. So over the course of someone making that change, it's like they have to have a certain number of points that lead them there. And you don't ever know where you are on that line unless you're the last one. Well, I made the change.
It's a great point.
Vegan, but you were just the last domino before it tipped. Right? And so if you come at it from that mindset, it's almost exciting when you see that dynamic, because you're like, oh, you're getting there. You're not that far. Congratulations. If you want to tell them that, that would probably not go over well. But if you know that, it just helps. It helps to channel that anger or frustration that they're trying to give to you, trying to rile you up, into like, wow, cool. We did it.
Really cool.
And not like we did it, we angered you, but cool. You're a seed is planted,
Yes.
and you're thinking about it, and it's
Sure.
bothering you, so that's you're closer.
Exactly.
Yeah, I would like to mention a story real quick. So when this was like 1996-ish, protesting Ringling Brothers Barnum Bailey Circus, right? And back then, 1996 now, not dating myself or anything, but it was like so far from thinking that this could ever change. You know, I mean, every person was like, you are awful people, you're ruining everybody's family time. You know, people just, and Ringling Brothers is so huge, right? So 20 years later, they stopped using animals. And it took 20 years. But how worth it to start when you know that wasn't happening tomorrow. The change wasn't going to happen maybe in 10 years, but it happened. So to help people realize that everything is going to make a difference, even if it's not right away. And I think that is sometimes challenging. Like, what's the point? We're so far from this. But we're not. Right. You know?
So I just want to give you a little gratifying story to follow up on that, because of course I was within the Ringling Brothers protest too 15 years ago, and again, it was just very like unheard of, right? And so again, you never know your impact truly on those you affected, you know, while you're protesting. However, I met an amazing vegan animal rights activist recently, and I was like, oh, how did you get started? And she said, well, actually, I was taking my kids to a circus. And I never thought about it, and I walked up to the circus, and there was someone who gave me a flyer. And they said, did you know what really went on there here? And she said, something in me just, instead of just passing on by, I took that flyer. I went in, and I went to the circus, and I got inside, and I looked at the flyer, and I turned around, and I took my kids, and I left. And now I advocate for animals and animal rights.
Wow.
So, you know,
that is so, I know, right? That's so good. Yeah, because you just don't know the impact of what you're doing in that moment, right? If it's coming from the place that is a full self-expression, right, and it's a love for what you're doing and the animals, you don't know the ripple effect, right? Because even starting this sanctuary, I've had to look into, infrastructure of the barn and the building of the fence and then the soil and right. So I actually had a conversation with someone who owns a company, and I wrote an email to get a quote on a certain project. And within 20 minutes of me writing this email to ask for a quote of this project, he phoned me and goes, you have a sanctuary? You're in Virginia? I said, well, yeah, I'm just starting this and that and with pigs and and he goes, I can't tell my clients, but I've now gone plant-based, and I'm so happy that you're here. But he was so afraid to tell the clients because he knew that he would get made fun of or shunned or whatever. But he was so happy that we were here. So I said, okay, maybe there's even more of the closet folks, right, that are willing to go, if they can do it and come out and be here and say what they're doing, maybe I can too, right? So I was loving that part. I was like, you know what, I'm just going to say it, and whoever it lands on, that it reaches them, great. If not, then not, right? Yeah. Incredible. Yeah. All right. Well, so we've gone through all kinds of different forms of activism, what your organization does. If you had to give a definition of activism, what would it be? And first, I'd like to hear what Fawn's definition is, okay? And then I'd like to hear Julia's after that.
Putting her on the spot.
I know, I'm putting you on the spot a little bit, Fawn. But as you are coming into the organization, I'd like to hear your perspective first, if you don't mind.
I really think any and everything could really work, whether or not it's just having a conversation with a stranger, anybody, just anything you can do to just show people what's going on behind closed doors, stuff that these industries don't want anybody to see.
Right.
You can just go about it anyway. I don't know.
Yeah. So awareness, education, right? Yeah, absolutely. Okay, great. How about you?
Posting pictures, sharing stuff. And even if it's somebody else's content, that's what I found myself doing on Instagram a lot.
Yeah.
Was just kind of sharing stuff from, Ed and Joey or, different sanctuaries. Like, I like showing you know, the happy stuff, sanctuaries. Oh my God, look how cute they are. So people's like, oh my God, they're so cute. And then you click the next story, and it's an animal hanging upside down. With blood coming out of its throat, and it's just like, this is what happens. This is what you're paying for. So like, just.
Yeah,
it's a great answer.
It is.
There's no right answer.
Yes,
right. There's no like clear-cut definition really. And so in addition to that, and just amplifying that in itself, you know, it's speaking up for animals. It's showing what happens behind closed doors. It's showing what, you know, mainstream media is not going to show you. It's giving an insight into these animals' lives, regardless of whether they're in the entertainment industry, they're in the clothing industry, they're being exploited in agriculture, or, you know, all of the different ways that they're exploited. But it's breaking that stigma. It's fighting for animals and their rights and their liberation, in any form whatsoever, using your skills, using, you know, whatever you can to be a voice for animals. I don't want to say their voice, because they have their own voice, and we can help amplify that as well. But it's being a voice for them, and it's fighting against the injustice that's happening to them in any way you can.
Yeah, absolutely. That is really awesome. So I usually like to ask then, since we've gone through different forms of activism, right, kind of establishing the definition, who are our favorite activists, or could we even name one, or who you think might be most influential, right? You know, do you want to start, Ella? Who might be your favorite, or who's most influential for you?
Oh, why are you starting with me?
Oh, okay, I don't know.
Oh, I've got so many. And there really isn't just one. I mean, there's so many, and you know what? People respond differently to different forms of activism at different points on their journey as well. So, you know, when I was doing more of the direct activism, there's such a place for that. I mean, we need that, like you said, for the media, for, you know, to spread that message in a wide, you know, all around the world. But we also need people that go about it in a little more gentle way. And it's all these things that add up, right? But I will say, when I was just a kid, and I actually went vegetarian when I was 7, I connected the food on my plate with the animal that I was. And back then, there really wasn't information readily available, right? So I had to really seek it out from a young age. And of course, I got in touch with PETA and Ingrid Newkirk specifically. So I want to give her a shout out if I'm going to do that, because she was one from when I was just a kid who influenced me, and you know, they would just send me like boxes, you know, between them and Vegan Outreach and Farm Sanctuary. It's just, there's so many, I can't name one, but I will give a shout out
Ingrid.
Today to Ingrid.
All right. So I would say for me, for sure, I think the one that sticks out the most for me is Gary Yourofsky. And it was mainly because I saw something, or maybe he was talking on a TED Talk or something, where he talked about how he saved the minks. So he went to some, and I'm sorry if I'm changing the story here, but what I understood about it was that I think he went to a mink farm or factory, and he was like figuring out how to go in and free them. And I, in that moment, could feel that he was freeing these like thousands of minks, and it still even gets me, right? Like, where, like, I could feel that like he put his life on the line. Like, he went to jail for these things, but it was those minks that mattered in that moment. And it meant, like, to me, it really hit home. I just was like, holy my God, this guy is renegade, you know what I mean? And I was like, oh, that's amazing. While me, I wouldn't necessarily choose to go to jail, right? Like, I probably wouldn't. I don't know that I have that in me. But I understood about stepping up for them and their lives. That resonated with me big time. So anyway, I would say for me, that I would say Gary was the first most influential. Yeah. How about you, Julia? Do you think, is there one, or is it all? Or how do you feel about that?
There's many different stages in my life, like you said. You know, I had different ones that came to me and just really helped me. So when I first got started, I was just a kid too, like 18, fresh out my parents' house, still in my parents' house, you know, still in high school. And it was reading Ingrid Newkirk's book, Free the Animals, right? And so I read that and I was like, oh, that's what I want to do. I want to be part of the ALF, right? I will go to jail. I will do whatever it takes, right? So that was like my goal. And then when I realized like, you know, what I was really capable of doing in that moment was more, I want to say Earthling Ed and Joey Carbstrong really gave me the courage to, and the knowledge to do more street activism, to feel secure in myself that there's nothing anybody could throw at me that I wouldn't be able to discuss, right? And so even though I don't think we should put any single one person on a pedestal, I found that their outreach, listening to different Mythbusters and different things that people threw at them, it just gave me the courage to really get involved. And once I had that, I realized like I can do anything. But also my biggest influencers to this day have been my peers, have been my fellow animal rights activists, because what I find is like they're there with me, like they're not like a celebrity, they're not out of reach, they're not someone we're putting on a pedestal. They're in the streets, they're doing it now, they're making these changes, and when we come together, we build this energy that fuels all of us into doing more, gives us like this passion, gives us like they're just like me. They're just like me, and look what they're doing. And they'll talk to you. And they'll give you advice, and they'll go out there with you. And like that, building that community is everything.
Oh, that's so great. Oh, I love that. How about you, Fawn?
I would have to say when I first really got into the vegan lifestyle, I forget what I searched up on YouTube, but I remember the first video I saw was Earthling Ed's, like his most inspiring one, the one that had like the little green background he was standing in front of, and I saw that and I was just like, oh my God, like that's when like stuff like really started to hit me, and just listening to him make these like connections and stuff like that. And then of course Joey Carbstrong. I love Ed because he is like you mentioned, he's kind of softer. He's super educational, super informative. But he comes off, you know, and he still gets his point across, but he comes off, you know, in a softer tone. But then at the same time, I love Joey because he's straightforward, he's unfiltered. Like he doesn't care. He'll straight up call you an animal abuser. He's like, yo, I'm gonna tell you like it is. And I love Gary too for the same reasons. He does not care. I've watched every Gary Yourofsky interview I could find, and he's so blunt. He tells you the truth. But yeah, those are the three main people that I love them. I think they're legendary. They're so inspirational. I would say those three for me.
And I think also one other one that popped to mind was, you know, Jane Goodall, when we think about the work with the gorillas, and I think again back in my generation it was Gorillas in the Mist, right? Sigourney Weaver did the movie, right, or whatever. And when she was like, "Get off my mountain," I mean, literally, Ella and I are in the in the barn with the pigs, like picking off the ticks, and I'm like, "Get off my pig," you know, I'm like, "Get off my pig." I mean, you just feel this sense when you connect with an animal, you know, like you are, you know, will go to the ends, right, of the earth for that animal. So I do want to also, give her a shout out as well. She's been a long-term animal activist, indeed. Well, thank you so very much on behalf of Hogs and Kisses. We just can't thank you enough for the work that you do, spreading the word, communication, sharing, and also doing it in such a way that you're doing it from a place of love, right? You're not doing this as like a shunning or criticism of people or whatever. You're doing it literally for the betterment of animals and really taking an empowerment stance on that. So we absolutely love and support the work that you do. And thank you so much for listening to us for Beat Around the Barn, our episode on what is animal activism. We hope that you've learned a lot today. All of the information that we've shared, we'll put links in the show notes, so please do click on them and help educate yourselves, as well as feel free to reach out to Animal Activism Mentorship if you'd like to get more involved.